Good morning and welcome to week 2 of the NEWEA 2021 annual conference. I have the pleasure of introducing today's keynote speaker, Liza Morris of the Alkemi Group. Liza Morris launched the Alkemi Group in 2014 after spending 2 decades in the health science communications, leading offices in New York and Washington, D.C. Liza's work on science communications targets organizations to build scientific credibility by forming partnerships, raising awareness, changing perceptions, and driving engagement to achieve results. With the current climate of many questioning science credibility, it puts those in the scientific field with the difficult task of obtaining buy-in from their stakeholders. Liza's discussion today will focus on how to communicate with key audiences about the vital work performed within the water industry. Liza's credentials are impressive, graduating from the American University with a BA in journalism and earning her MS in communications management at Syracuse University's Newhouse of Public Communications. She serves on the board of directors of the Progea Research Foundation and is a longtime TEDx curator. Liza was named 2006 Rising Star by Healthcare Businesswomen's Association. Her work has been recognized by the Platinum PR Awards and the PRSA Thoth Award. This only touches upon the work she has done, and I urge you to read more about her on our speaker's bio page. We are grateful that Liza has taken the time out of her schedule to share her knowledge on this important topic. I welcome you all to enjoy the discussion she has prepared for us today.
Thank you, Lauren, for that kind introduction. Hello from Washington, D.C. I'm Liza Morris, and in short, my job is to help people tell their science stories, and I'm thrilled to be with all of you today. So today is February 2nd. It's Groundhog's Day. That not so scientifically rooted day when a rodent meteorologist is coaxed out of his warm burrow to predict the temperature for the next 6 weeks. Groundhog Day, according to historians, can be traced back to an ancient Christian tradition where candles were used to predict the length and severity of winter. This tradition was carried on by the Germans, who used hedgehogs, not groundhogs, to predict the weather. And the practice was eventually brought to the US in the 1700s by Germanic settlers in Pennsylvania, who could not find hedgehogs. So they went with a groundhog because close enough, I guess. Every February 2nd since 1886, people have looked to that groundhog in Pennsylvania to see how soon we can expect spring based on whether Puxatawny Phil saw his shadow or not. So how accurate is Phil? Well, the site Live Science looked into this last year, and it turns out that he's not actually a viable candidate for employment at the National Weather Service. Between 1887 and 2020, Phil was correct about 39% of the time. And looking at his, specifically at the last 30 years, his accuracy has been closer to 36%. So look, a coin toss will get you 50% accuracy, and that 7-day forecast from an actual meteorologist is accurate about 80% of the time. And yet a 2017 survey by National Today found out that 8% of people surveyed believe that the groundhog is always right about the weather, and 3% reported using Groundhog Day as a reason not to go to work. So what does all of this have to do with what I'm talking about today with you? Well, just like Puxatawny Phil, science has a shadow looming over it. That shadow of public doubt in science affects scientists and engineers and public officials as you strive to communicate about your work. And why do people look to a groundhog, this folklore based on meteorological myth, instead of, say, a scientist who uses proven methods to tell you what the weather will be in the near future? Well, psychologists say that believing in something like folklore gives people a sense of understanding, of certainty, of control. So maybe we rest easier thinking we know the forecast for the next 6 weeks versus knowing the forecast for the next 10 days. That said, there are ways that you, in your respective roles, can bring the people you communicate with that same sense of understanding and certainty as well, You can ensure that you are communicating in a way that gets your point across and still gives people that sense of security that they crave. So, for the next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk to you about your offices, your agencies, your organizations, and the water quality and environmental industry itself, how you can use the most powerful tools of communications to overcome those doubts through three key techniques: clear, honest messaging, impactful imagery, and passionate personal storytelling. So we'll go through a simple checklist that ensures that you are targeting your communications as effectively as possible. We'll look at the most effective and efficient ways to use social media to buttress those efforts. And we'll sort out the who's and when's and how's of successful messaging, how to make sure that your work is seen and heard by the players you need to reach without getting lost in the noise or the folklore you are competing with, all through the lens of science. Today, trust in science and scientists is in challenging territory, and more Americans are more and more confused about what they see and hear and download. Scientists and public servants who dedicate their entire lives to a particular area of expertise are now challenged on a daily basis by Joe Internet. Now, it's fair to say that science actually begins with disbelief. Disbelief that a rumble of thunder was really meant that Thor was swinging his heavenly hammer. Disbelief is essential for the progress of knowledge. But what the scientific community faces today is a bit more than just stubborn skepticism or blissful ignorance or even flat earthism. In recent years, we have all watched this country divide into science believers and disbelievers, people who accept climate change and people who say it's a hoax or fake. So perhaps reaching the people who trust science isn't the greatest challenge. In order to win public approval and trust, you need to engage with all of those people, the believers and the skeptics. A recent commentary published in the journal Nature notes that we are at a pivotal moment for trust in science, spurred by the COVID-19 pandemic. And the authors urge us not to waste it. In August 2019 and again in March 2020, the authors issued a survey to a panel of more than 300 US residents representing the general public. Comparing the two, they sought to understand trust before and after the pandemic. Strong trust in science jumped from 41% to 48%. And they found that trust in science was the most important predictor of a public health recommendation compliance. In other words, following recommendations to reduce the spread of COVID-19. Yet the authors warned that this increase in trust was not enough. What was needed to enhance public trust in science even further, for the pandemic and beyond, was confidence, warmth, and transparency in communication. While scientists are regularly noted for their competence, the author suggests that there was some room for growth elsewhere. I do know someone, a meteorologist, who could use some help in the categories of warmth and transparency in communication. Let's take a look at what not to do.
This is pitiful. 1,000 people freezing their butts off waiting to worship a rat. What a hype. Sound like they used to mean something in this town. They used to pull the hog out and they used to eat it. You're hypocrites, all of you. You got a problem with what I'm saying, Larry? Untie your tongue and you come out here and talk, huh? Am I upsetting you, Princess? You know, you want a prediction about the weather. You're asking the wrong Phil. I'll give you a winter prediction. It's gonna be cold, it's gonna be gray, and it's gonna last you for the rest of your life.
So now that we know what not to do, let's focus on the things that we should do. Here is a list of 10 points to keep in mind while you are communicating about science. Number 1 is know your audience and your goal. 175 years ago, Edgar Allan Poe wrote an essay called The Philosophy of Composition. And in it, Poe wrote, he preferred to commence with the consideration of an effect, that he always enumerated effects of which the heart, the intellect, or the soul is susceptible. What one shall I select? That's a pretty simple rule that still applies to everything we write, every speech we make, everything we film, we tweet and post. Who is going to read this, and what do I want them to feel? So before you compose anything, you've got to know your audience. Are they town planners? Are they policymakers? Are they members of Congress or state assembly? Are they reporters from a newspaper? homeowners dealing with a flooded basement, your peers? What is your end goal in communicating with them? Do you want to educate them? Do you want to move them to action? So number 2, use compelling, relatable language in your messaging. Ask yourself, what might my audience need? They may care about different aspects of the science, so be clear which angle or aspect you will take. What's the clearest, most succinct way to share the information you need to get out? What has to be included? What do your audiences care about? And what do they need? If this is a longer written piece or a speech, ask yourself, does the opening of this draw the reader in or the listener in? Is there a payoff for the reader or listener's time? Meaning, if I take 10 minutes to read this blog, will I get something out of it? Do you have a clear call to action? And my ultimate pressure test for compelling, relatable language, can you make this interesting to both a third grader and a Nobel Prize laureate? Number 3, connect your message to a larger trend or hot topic in science or society. It's important to connect your topic to what's happening in the world. If your effort involves working with media, they will need to know why they should be talking about this now. And the same goes for social media or other forms of communication. Today's hot topics might be climate change, COVID. It can also be a trend, something we're seeing in society. I serve on the board of directors for a New England-based organization called the Progeria Research Foundation, and I've been working with them for about 17 years. Progeria is an ultra-rare, rapid-aging disease that, before treatment was available, had an average age of death around 14 years old. When I first started working with PRF, we knew of about 40 kids with progeria. So how did we get global recognition for this disease? Well, one important message we included from the start was the connection to heart disease. Every child with progeria dies of a heart attack or a stroke. And heart disease, even in the midst of a global pandemic, is still the #1 cause of death worldwide. So learning more about progeria can help scientists learn more about heart disease as well as the general aging process. Now, a word of warning on connecting to trends and hot topics. It's best to stay apolitical in your communication. You risk losing about half of your audience by bringing politics into the discussion, so avoid mixing the two when possible. Number 4, use the inverted pyramid. In journalism school, I learned reel-to-reel editing, which is not helpful anymore, but the inverted pyramid still is. So you start with the most important information, the most newsworthy facts, and add supporting content below that. As you're skimming the newspaper or a website or a post on LinkedIn, you're just reading the headline and the first couple of lines to see if it's worth your time to read further. This one is tough for many of my clients because you were probably taught to do the opposite. Thinking in scientific journal format, you likely start with the background details and then work your way toward the conclusion at the very end. That format is great for journals, but elsewhere, try to start with a headline and the conclusion to engage your audience from the very start. They'll be more interested in hearing the details and the background if they're intrigued by the outcome. Number 5, use visuals. Visuals are so important to help you communicate your story and to help you break through the noise. Still or moving, photograph, or infographic, they help to boil complex issues down to a few vital points. People are bombarded with messages every day. That abundance of information has resulted in a significant drop in attention span. 20 years ago, the average human attention span was 12 seconds, and today it's only 8 seconds. For reference, a goldfish has a 9-second attention span. The bottom line is that stories with images get far more engagement than those without. Infographics are shared 3 times more often than any other type of image on Twitter. And videos are 6 times more likely to be shared than a text-based tweet. People consume information through videos and visuals, so incorporate those wherever possible. Number 6, be credible, be trustworthy, be personable. It's best not to communicate in the format of a scientific publication, but it is best to cite them when you speak. Remember the authors of the Nature commentary who urge scientists to use competence, warmth, and transparency? A credible speaker will back what they are saying with published research. Another question, are you working with a totally new approach or concept in science? Start by presenting that new concept at a conference or publish in a journal. In the era of social media, ads that promise the world but often leave readers skeptical, backing your communication with published research will assure others that this information is trustworthy and that you as a speaker or writer are credible. On social media, It's good to be a person. People prefer to engage with other people versus companies. So, sharing something on Twitter or LinkedIn from a personal account versus a corporate account is likely to get more engagement. Also, on Twitter, about 15% of tweets are suspected bots. So be sure you have a clear picture and description and name so that people know you're a real human being. Is there an interesting backstory to your research? What inspired it? How did you come to this idea? That could be a really interesting story to tell. Number 7, wrap your data in a story. Do you remember the 3 key techniques we mentioned at the start of this discussion? Clear, succinct messaging, impactful visuals, passionate personal storytelling. Of those 3, storytelling may be the most powerful of all. Now, I've been talking for too long, so I'm going to show you a quick video I put together that helps to explain the science of storytelling.
Start with a story. Whether you're a scientist or a CEO, or both, you need people to listen when you talk. And one proven method of engaging your audience is to start with a good story. But why? Humans are hardwired for storytelling. We can trace storytelling to 30,000-year-old cave drawings in France. Ancient Greek epics and Native American fables were all passed down through oral storytelling before they were written down. But storytelling can be used for more than entertaining others. Stories are how we best engage with others. Stories are how we learn. Stories are how we make sense of the world around us. When you share stray facts, data, and figures, you are reaching just a few areas of the listener's brain, that being the areas responsible for processing and comprehending language. When you wrap those facts in a good story, that listener is 22 times more likely to remember those facts you want to convey. Neuroscientists have discovered that storytelling still engages those language processing areas in the brain, but a host of other chemicals are produced too, like dopamine, cortisol, oxytocin, and even endorphins. Lighting up those other areas of the brain creates a sense of empathy, trust, and connection with your listeners. It also enhances feelings of creativity, greater focus, and improved memory. The science of storytelling is clear. Infusing your data into a story connects you to your audience on an emotional level, moving them to understand and act. So, next time you're communicating about science, will you start with a story?
We could spend this entire talk on the science of storytelling. It is a powerful method of engaging your audiences from the start. If you are interested in exploring this further, I recommend reading more by neuroeconomist Paul Zak. He was among the first to identify the role of oxytocin in creating trust between strangers. Number 8, engage the communications team early. If you have access to a communications team, engage with them as soon as you are planning a study or planning some type of outreach. First, it will help them prioritize your projects and timing, but they may also have some insights into some of those bigger trends or hot topics we discussed earlier. They could help you think more broadly about how this fits into the world right now. If you don't have access to a team, there are great tools out there that can help you tell your story. Number 9, use the right social media channels the right way for your audience. Most of my clients want to reach professional audiences, so the focus is usually on Twitter or LinkedIn. When consumer audiences are the focus, platforms like Instagram or Facebook or TikTok are best. Whether it's your handle or your organization's handle, be sure you have a regular cadence that is optimized for each specific platform. 3 to 4 posts per week for Twitter, 2 to 4 posts per week for LinkedIn. Include those visuals to increase engagement, particularly infographics and videos. Make sure you time your posts. You can schedule those in advance. The stats change all the time, but as of right now, for Twitter, the best days are Tuesday and Wednesday mornings, and the worst time is Friday afternoon. For LinkedIn, the best times are Wednesday and Thursday mornings, and the worst time is also Friday afternoon. When someone mentions you on social media, remember to reply and retweet, engaging every time that there is a mention. Number 10, engage partners and the community. Partnerships help you get so much more done, and they can also help you amplify your message to a broader audience when communicating. If you are working with a partner on a project, include them and coordinate the effort. Many of you also already engage with your community in your work, and this is a proven way of increasing trust in science. NIH recently published a research feature examining the surprising surge in diversity in COVID-19 vaccine clinical trial enrollments. The author determined that community engagement builds trust in science research. Now, you all know that engagement in the community is not a one-time effort, but a long-term commitment. But it can significantly improve your connections, and it is effective in dispelling myths and misinformation. So let's look at some good examples of what we've been talking about today. While I was preparing to join you, I read your latest journal and noted a few pieces. In reading about stormwater mitigation in Somerville, Massachusetts, and in checking out Somerville's Flood Ready website, I found clear, accessible language and easy to navigate Q&As. You can't get more clear and concise than that. I found really great visuals that helped me process the messages I found, shortcuts to share this on social media as well. Question, in general, is flooding getting worse? Answer, yes. Climate change means that flooding will happen more often and more intensely, including in places that haven't typically flooded in the past. I found a short video with captions that gets the key points across. Say, if I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old at home in virtual school, and I don't have more than 3 minutes to process this information that I need. True story, by the way. These are all great examples of good science communication. In reading about confronting racial inequalities in the water and wastewater industry, I was immediately drawn in because this fits in with an important societal trend of equity. In reading about confronting racial inequalities in the water and wastewater industry, I was immediately drawn in because this fits within an important societal trend. I saw clear, concise messaging. I saw images that helped me understand the messages. The subheads and numbered inequalities and actions for change in communities and the workforce, academia, and education made it easy for me to skim the article, get to the area that interested me most. I saw great images of the people involved in this effort, and that really helped me to have a stronger personal connection to the project. It was great to see so many excellent examples from you. To close, there are many discussions exploring our post-truth world, the age of disbelief, the war on science. If we are in the age of disbelief, then good science communications could be the antidote. Just remember, it takes clear, honest messaging, impactful imagery, and passionate personal storytelling. I hope you're able to leave today with a few new tools to help you share your wealth of knowledge and your great work, separate fact from folklore, and continue to improve trust in science. Now, as Bill Murray said in Groundhog Day, we mustn't keep our audience waiting. Thank you.